Test your knowledge. It has now come time to see what you know, your multiple choice options. I'm going to give you some questions. We'll give you a few seconds to put in your answer, and I'll give you the answer. Let's start out easy. Do some true false ones. Ethical behavior practice is required of licensed engineers in Colorado. What do you think? True or false? True or false? Circle one, circle the other. True or false? Ethical behavior practice is required. Engineers in Colorado? True. That is put into the bylaws and rules, which say ethical conduct. The licensees shall conduct the practice of architecture, engineering, and land surveying in an ethical manner. So let's at least have a little bit of fun with this. A little bit of mind candy. My prior portion of my conversation is that you have morals, ethics, and laws. As soon as you elevate ethics to laws, they cease to become ethics. They're now legally enforceable, which is a sort of a binary position. One, I feel good that because I am part of a profession that legally we have to act in an ethical manner. It gives me better grounds to stand on when I am telling a client why I can or cannot do something, or I should do something, saying I'm legally required to. And that part's good. But the other part is, then we really don't have ethics, because the ethics are the laws, and the two are meant to be totally different. I mean, not totally different, but they're two different elevations of the same thing. And so as one becomes the other, they're the same. All right, question number 2. Dishonesty in engineering inspections or reports is prohibited by law, not just ethics, for civil engineers. Once again, question number 2, enter your answer. True or false? Dishonesty in engineering inspections or reports is prohibited by law, not just ethics. Same mind candy here. Well, is it ethics or law? If ethics require it, well, shoot, what I just read to you before says in the laws, we have to act ethically, therefore it's not ethics anymore, it's laws. But of course the answer is true. But in the bylaws and the rules, which is Colorado, or the Code of Colorado Regulations, licensees shall issue professional statements only in an objective and truthful manner. The rules shall include, but not be limited to, objectivity and truth. Licensees shall be objective and truthful in professional reports, statements, or testimony. That is a true. 3, true or false? Failure to pay child support can result in the suspension or revocation of licensure, namely your PE, potentially your EI license. I don't have true clarification on that. Either way, failure to pay child support can result in the suspension or revocation of your PE license. What do you think, true or false? Put in your answer. Answer. What do you think? Answer is true. Colorado revised statutes. Remember we talked about earlier the 44 books on the shelf. We talked about before about Title 12, which is our profession, but Title 26 says the State Board of Human Services is authorized in coordination with any state agency, board, or blah, 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 to issue, to revoke, or deny, terminate, or suspend professional occupational if you are, and it's a very long paragraph, I'm going to skip ahead, if you are paying less than 50% of your current monthly child support obligation and you are more than 6 months behind, you can have your license suspended by the state until you are caught up. Number 4, an engineer can claim responsible charge, and that's put in quotes, responsible charge for half a document. If you don't know what responsible charge is, you should do a little bit of research at the end of this presentation. That is what you must have in order to affix your seal to a report or a set of specifications or a set of plans. You can only apply your seal if you have responsible charge. But my question is a little bit different. An engineer can claim responsible charge for half a document. So imagine a 24 by 36 inch set of plans. Can I put my stamp on and say this half is mine or this part is mine? What do you think? True or false? True or false? Enter your answers. Answer is true. Bylaws and rules, Colorado Code of Regulations 1.3b and 3 says, if you affix your seal to that document, you are effectively saying you're responsible for everything. That is the point of licensure. But you are permitted under 1.585 to claim responsibility for a part. Now think this through. What they're saying is as design professionals, if we're going to take on something that we could collaborate on with other disciplines and put together a detail or a plan set that better illustrates on how to build it, we're not prohibited from doing so. The example I like best is imagine a mechanical drawbridge. We got the electrical engineer designing the power. We have a structural engineer designing all the trusses. The transportation engineer designing the pavements and the lane width and perhaps the guardrail and the sidewalks. We have electrical, mechanical, maybe an architect designing the ornamental stuff. If we draw one collective document that says, here's how to build it, we can issue all 5 stamps on there. The architect saying, I'm responsible for what paint color the bridge is, and the transportation is saying, I'm responsible for the lane widths. The structural engineer saying truss sizes and welds and connections, and the mechanical engineer saying I'm responsible for all the motors that lift it, and the electrical engineer saying I'm responsible for all the power that turns on the lights and runs the motors. We are allowed to do that. And if that sounds a surprise to you, check out 1.5A5. Number 5, an ethical engineer can be retained by an architect they believe is occasionally dishonest. I don't really mean to throw architects under the bus. It's a contrived example. And that architect's a little shady, or put in maybe a contractor. That contract's a little shady. As long as I have my house in order, can I be retained by that architect or that contractor? True or false? What do you think? Lock in your answer. I'm going to give you another 2 seconds. What do you think? True or false? False. We have a caliber of associations. 1.3A6, caliber of association, licensees shall not permit the use of their name or firm name nor associate in business ventures with any person or firm that they have reason or should have reason to believe is engaged in fraudulent or dishonest business or professional practices. Caliber of association. Even though your house is in order, you need to make sure that the people that you associate with also have their house in order. 6. An engineer retained by the project architect or owner can directly invoice the contractor for inspections performed during construction. So my bill got paid by the architect or the owner directly, and then during construction, the contractor says, we need you to come out and look at the rebar, look at the pavement, look at the soil compaction, whatever it is. Can I send one bill out to the architect and then send my construction inspection ones out to that contractor? True or false? Lock in your answer. Circle 1, commit to something. Print out the sheets, commit to something. It's not fair when I put up the answer that you say, yeah, armchair, I knew that. That's what I would have answered. That is false. Under 1.3D5, more than one source of compensations, licensees, you, shall not accept compensation, financial or otherwise, from more than one party for services on the same project or for services pertaining to the same project. And here's the but, or the exception, and you know there's a but coming. Unless the circumstances are fully disclosed to and agreed to by all interested parties. So you can get there, long as everybody knows about it. But if you simply send one invoice to the architect per your contract, and then without having a conversation or getting agreement, send another one to the contractor, that would be a violation of the rules. I put in there Luke 16:13, which is essentially a biblical passage. I use this a lot because this situation comes up for me a lot. That a slave cannot serve 2 masters. You cannot be retained by 2 entities who have control over you as a consultant. And your initial reaction is, hey, I'm the ethical person. I can do all this. And as long as I do no wrong, nothing bad happens. And in reality, it does happen regularly without any bad problem. But what happens if that contractor and that architect all of a sudden get at odds? The contractor says, all right, engineer, we're going to start making claims against the architect or the owner, and we want you as our expert or our consultant. And the architect says the same thing, or the owner says the same thing. We have claims now against the contractor. You're our expert. If you build both, you are not obligated to both of them, and now you are in the middle of a fight without clear path. And that is why the rules say you should not do that. Another easy one, the low-hanging fruit on why this is not allowed is, let's say I'm designing a bridge and a manufacturer says, hey, we'll give you, Peter Marxhausen, $10,000 to specify galvanized or epoxy rebar that only meets this spec which we produce. If I got paid by the municipality to design the bridge, and I got paid $10,000 to specify the rebar, that's clearly bribery, right? That feels wrong. We all know that's wrong. And it's hard to define bribery, but if you say, all right, you may not have payment from more than one entity on one project, it makes it a lot clearer. It's easier to define whether or not you have done something ethical or unethical. Number 7, a janitor or building manager may use the title maintenance engineer. Hi, I'm Bob. I'm the maintenance engineer here. What do you think? True or false? 50-50. Commit to something. What do you think? True or false? Maintenance engineer. Is that allowed? Colorado has what we call title protection. Colorado revised, so this is the laws. This isn't even the bylaws. This is the Colorado laws. It's just written in there. Unless you're licensed or exempted, it is unlawful for any individual to use the title civil engineer, structural engineer, chemical engineer, petroleum engineer, mining engineer, mechanical engineer, or electrical engineer. And in addition, next sentence, unless you're licensed, you may not use the words engineer or engineered or engineering in any offer to perform or offer to provide a service to the public. And here's what the board is really saying, so you don't become overzealous. If I'm a medically trained person in first aid, I cannot call myself a doctor. That makes sense, right? I mean, it's conveying to the public that I hold certifications that I don't. And if I'm offering to provide medical services and by calling me a doctor, somebody could get misled and be hurt. But I would offer to you, down the street from where I live, there's a place that's called Toy Doctor, and they work on Toyotas. They fix cars. There's nobody who's really pursuing Toy Doctor for somehow convincing the public that they should go there for an MRI, right? They use the term doctor, but nobody's misinterpreting it. And so although you could use the term engineer, if it could be construed by the public that you are offering to perform services that we collectively offer, that is illegal. But if you're throwing an engineer out there such that nobody in the public would possibly think that it is an offer, then the board really doesn't care. Let's say I open up a restaurant and I call it Pizza Engineer. Nobody's coming to Pizza Engineer to have a bridge design, and so that's really off the radar generally by the board. And I can't speak in absolutes; only the board can speak for themselves. But if you look in the minutes, that's not something they chase down. Number 8, the act of performing a home inspection to evaluate structural integrity for a real estate transaction is considered engineering or requires licensure as such. Well, I hire a home inspector. I'm going to buy this home. I hire a home inspector. They're generally, let's say, as a rule, not PEs. Are they allowed to talk about structural integrity? What do you think? True or false? True or false? Enter your answers. It is true. Unless you are licensed as a PE or an architect for that matter, you are not allowed to talk about several things. And I will read from the laws. The inspection and examination of a single or multiple family, residential, commercial, industrial, or institutional structure regarding structural, electrical, mechanical, thermal, insulation, roofing, or waterproofing subsystems for integrity or capacity, or recommending doing the diagnosis or analysis of problems or the design of remedial actions is the practice of engineering in Colorado and requires licensure as such. Which, if you don't know that rule exists, hopefully your brain is spinning going, oh my gosh, what about roofers who come out that are clearly not PEs and they say, we'll do a free inspection and recommend that you need a roof? Yeah, that is a violation, black and white. 12-120-202, Colorado Revised Statutes, you're not allowed to do that. Home inspectors are not allowed to say your structure has proper integrity unless they're a PE. Chew on that one. Number 9, in the time of an emergency, disaster, or catastrophe, the state, let's say the state of Colorado, can call upon registered professional engineers to perform urgent rescue work without compensation. They can say, hey, you are licensed. Mr. Marxhausen, we have an earthquake that's hit in western Colorado. We need you to show up on air. We are calling in on order of the governor, and we're not going to pay you. True or false? Is that allowed in Colorado? True or false? Think about it. Circle it. Commit to something for me. Answer is false. Comes from 24.138. Mandatory donation of services is prohibited. That is actually the title of this section. No regulatory agency or department, division, agency, branch, blah, 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 shall require any person practicing a regulated profession or occupation to donate such person's professional services without compensation. They also cannot threaten that they're not going to renew your license or do any type of horse trading in exchange. If they need your services, they need to engage you fairly in a contract or a contractual nature. 10. Ooh. Can an engineer be an alcoholic? Yes or no? Can an engineer be an alcoholic? No. And normally, if this is a live presentation, I get a couple hands coming up. If you're a recovering alcoholic, I congratulate you. Keep on efforts. That's not what I'm asking. The real part that's written into law, it says, habitual or excessive use or abuse of alcohol or controlled substances or habit-forming drugs is prohibited. How do I define that? If it's a Friday night and you're having a glass of wine with friends, no issue. But if you show up on Tuesday morning and you need 3 fingers of vodka to get the day going, that's a problem. I would offer to you the proper interpretation of that is when you perform engineering or provide engineering services, you need to be sober, period. If you need to be on some sort of mind-altering drug or alcohol to be able to crunch some numbers or work CAD or have a meeting with a client, that's a problem, and that is a violation of this particular statute. You need to be sober. And if you cannot perform engineering in a non-sober state, that's an addiction, that's a problem, and you need to get that under control. That is a violation. Number 11. Have some fun here. Marijuana is legal in Colorado. When can an engineer, a professional engineer, a PE, use it? A, no restrictions. B, only while not working or after hours. C, only if not dependent upon or addicted, which is a throwback to my last slide. D, never. Give me your best guess. Marijuana is clearly legal in Colorado and is becoming more and more legal in other states. That's beside the point. When can you use it? No restrictions, not working, only if not dependent upon or never. Hopefully, my previous slide, at least you're contemplating B because you know that or at least striking out A. Answer is never. Colorado Revised Statutes 120 says it is a violation of licensure to use any Schedule I controlled substance as set forth in Section 18, which is the criminal code in Colorado. If I look under Title 18 in the criminal code, tetrahydrocannabis, which is marijuana, is restricted. And that's one of those things that it gets back to, that there's still illegal federally. And in Colorado, if it's banned on a federal level, it is illegal for any engineer to use ever. 12. Colorado has Good Samaritan laws. Colorado has Good Samaritan laws that extend protection to engineers. True or false? True or false? What do you think? Good Samaritan. True or false? Lock in your answers. Where are you at? That is true. Colorado Revised Statutes 1321-108 and 1321-108.3 provide it. And I'll explain more after the next slide. 13. Colorado's Good Samaritan laws offer protection for an engineer under which of the following circumstances? A, shoring of a structure to prevent collapse. There's been a fire and we're going to install shoring, or a bridge. We're going to keep that bridge from collapsing. Does a Good Samaritan law apply to you? B, advisory recommendations to occupy or not occupy a structure. C, design of remedial actions following a collapse or quote, collapse, wildfire, wind, or flood event, unquote. D, humanitarian aid or rescue of a trapped or injured person. What do you think? We just agreed that there are Good Samaritan laws in Colorado. which one of these would it apply to? And you can choose multiple answers. That's fair game. What do you think? D, humanitarian aid or rescue of a trapped, injured person. So I do feel that as civil engineers, we interface with infrastructure and we could get called upon to aid individuals. It's a matter of time before tornadoes hit or earthquakes hit or wildfires hit. In what capacity can we act without being in a contract that defines our relationship or our liability? So, Colorado Revised Statutes 1321, persons rendering emergency assistance are exempt from civil liability. Sorry, let me back up one more. An architect licensed pursuant to Part 3 or a professional engineer licensed pursuant to Colorado Revised Statutes Title 12 who voluntarily and without compensation provides architectural damage assessment, engineering, or surveying services, respectively, at the scene of an emergency, shall not be liable for personal injury. At the scene of an emergency. That sounds like I could go out there and pretty much do anything at the scene of emergency. Here's what's hard about that one. Emergency is defined in the Colorado Revised Statutes in that section as a disaster emergency declared by executive order or proclamation of the government. So if you happen upon a vehicle accident, that's not a Colorado declared emergency. The governor has not declared a state of emergency. So you have a lot of protection if there's a declared state of emergency to assist in the structure. That doesn't always happen. All right, let's back up to another one. An architect or another person or professional engineer licensed under the Colorado Revised Statutes who voluntarily and without compensation provides engineering services at the scene of an accident shall not be liable for personal injury, wrongful death, property damage, or other loss. Here's my interpretation of this, and I've gone back and forth and asked for some relative guidance. And let me give you an analogy. If you happen upon a parking lot where there's a kid in a car seat in the back seat and it's 100 degrees out there and the kid looks like in distress, you forget that you're an engineer. You have the ability to take a rock, smash the window, and offer rescue assistance. And you're not responsible for that broken window. Ambulance shows up, kid gets put in the ambulance, off to the hospital. The state of emergency is now eliminated. You get in your car, you open your car door, the car door swings open, it dents that same car. You're responsible for the dents, but you're not responsible for the broken window. To give you that analogy, if you are providing engineering services to save a human, you are protected. If that capacity is, well, we need to cut a hole in a building wall, or we need to implement shoring, even if that shoring doesn't work and someone's hurt, there are protections for you. But once the person is extracted or rescued, you have no protection. Say, well, I will design the repairs to the school that doesn't have much money because, hey, it was an emergency. I'll be protected because it's Good Samaritan. No dice, none. You are not protected at all. Anything you do after the people are rescued or no longer in an urgent situation has the duty of professional responsibility, and you should be engaged in a proper contract. 14, which of the following most closely is the Colorado definition of an engineer? Let's see. A, a person that performs creative work for the public welfare. B, a person who is good with numbers. C, a person who is licensed to perform analysis or design work. D, a person that holds a bachelor's degree in engineering sciences. There are key words in there that fall under the definition in the Colorado Revised Statutes. Some people may say, well, that clearly is characteristics that all engineers have. No. I'm talking about the legal definition that is in the Colorado Revised Statutes. What do you think? C, a person who is licensed to perform analysis or design work. You are licensed by the state to design things or analyze things related to infrastructure. And there is a bit of a longer definition, but neither A nor B nor D shows up in that definition, in the short definition. 15, in Colorado, what's the difference between EI and EIT? Let's see, A, no difference whatsoever. One term's outdated while the other's not. One is a higher level than the other. Depends upon the degree earned. Okay, other states still use EIT. Colorado, they have specifically, and for quite some time, well over a decade, they have said EIT is a term we don't use anymore. If you've passed the FE exam, the Fundamentals of Engineering test, you are an EI. And so one term is outdated, EIT is. EI is the current one. And the only reason why I really share that is if you are a manager and you're ordering business cards for your junior engineers, you shouldn't put EIT on there. You should put EI on there. 16. And I'm going to go over. I'm going to push a little bit harder. We were going to get through this, but I'm clearly going to go over. I got about another 9 questions. What's the primary obligation of licensees? A, protect safety, health, and welfare of the public. B, company profit. C, code compliant designs. D, perform engineering services within areas of their competence. What's your answer? What's your primary obligation? It's in quotes. It's in quotes, which means it's part of the law. Under laws in Colorado, the primary obligation is to protect the safety, health, and welfare of the public. And I want to read for you what it really says, because Colorado, let me back up. A shows up in the NSPE canon rules of practice, and A shows up using those same words in canon number 1 of ASCE. Colorado has a slightly different take on it. It says primary obligation of licensees. Licensees shall at all times recognize that their primary obligation is to protect the safety, health, property, and welfare of the public. I'm licensed in 9 states. The other 8 states don't use the word property in there. Colorado does. Colorado elevates property up there with the health, safety, and welfare of the public. You must also protect property. Small caveat. Number 17, an engineer can seal, stamp their work with an electronic signature. Yeah, always. No, always. Yes, if you're in your license after 2012. D, yes, with conditions. What do you think? I think several of you have done a little research in the last 9 months, because obviously our profession has changed. Yes, with conditions. You can't simply use it willy-nilly. The electronic signature needs to be unique to the person using it, capable of verification under the sole control of the person using it, and linked to the document in such a manner that the electronic signature is invalidated if the data in the document are changed. 2020 has been a tough year, to say the least. A lot of building departments are only allowing electronic signatures, and they want those documents unlocked, yet also stamped that they can still make edits on there. It has put me in a lot of consternation with respect to how to handle that technically somebody else, the building department, the contractor, subcontractor, can work off those documents, go into Adobe, hit edit, and change typing in there. Make a number 8 rebar, a number 4 rebar, and then maybe the subcontractor says, eliminate all the rebar altogether. I have struggled with working in 2020 under those circumstances. And my recommendation is you struggle with it. You should struggle with it too. Consider what you're designing, what you're stamping, and how does the end user use those plans, that they're not being misinterpreted or altered such that they are unsafe. I will also tell you the board currently has a task force on this particular subject to update the rules to be at least 2020 standard. And they started that prior to 2020. It was started in 2019. They're trying to figure out how they really want to enforce this, because we are changing faster than the board can come up with rules. Number 18, an engineer seal or stamp is required on which of the following? A, each page of design drawings. B, certification page of bound specifications. C, certification page of engineering reports. D, signature page of correspondences. What do you think? What do you think? I'm a jerk. There's more than one answer is possible. This is Peter Marxhausen. Top 3. You don't have to put your stamp on emails or faxes if you're still using a fax, and if so, wow. But every page of design documents has to bear your seal. Bound specifications have to have your seal. Engineering reports, letters, inspection letters have to have your seal as well. 19, how long should you keep your stamped engineering documents? And by the way, this just changed in the last 4 months. This slide is updated with respect to those current requirements. A, until project completion. B, 3 years after the drawings are sealed. C, 7 years after the project completion. D, not less than the statute of repose per Colorado Revised Statutes 1380-104. What do you think? New laws. I will offer to you that up until 5 months ago, it was 6 months ago, it was B. 3 years after the drawings are sealed, or really 3 years after useful turnover of the project, then you can get rid of the stamped drawings. They've changed that. That is essentially your statute of limitations. Statute of repose is how long they have to initiate legal action against you, and then you have statute of limitations that once you become aware of it, how long do you have to file a lawsuit? That's a lot, and there's lots of complications in 1380-104 that I would not even try to explain to you, because different attorneys interpret it differently. I would suggest 7 to 8 years. That's what I would suggest. And really, in 2020, you can hold on to the stamped version of documents in perpetuity. That's not a big cost, and that's probably your better position. I think if you're getting rid of them faster than 7 years, you're making a bad decision. I can give you an example. There is a case, it's a public case, it's called the Goodman Residence. I've been working on it. It was built and completed in 2003. It is still in litigation with the various entities. 17 years later, they're still requiring documents from the entities that were involved. That is a worst case scenario. And by the way, the Goodman case, the reason why it's public knowledge, it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it's been handed back down, and it's still being litigated. That's a nightmare that I have to hold on to stuff for that long. 20. Oh man, I'm gonna try to go faster. You're required to report an engineer to the state board when A, you suspect a fellow engineer has violated any ethical canon, rule, law, or provision. B, you suspect an engineer has been dishonest. C, you know as an engineer has made a mistake. D, you know a fellow engineer has violated a rule of professional conduct related to the public safety, health, welfare, or law. When must you submit? D is the answer. You must turn in a fellow engineer when you know that they have violated a rule that affects the safety, health, and welfare of the public. If you don't, and the board finds out that you knew about it and you didn't turn them in, you can be disciplined, and that has happened. I could call out names of people that have become aware of a error, not an error, but malpractice of another independent engineer, did not submit that name to the board, and the board initiated disciplinary action against the person just for the knowledge. They, of course, initiated disciplinary action against the engineer that screwed up. So you must be careful. Now, just making a mistake. If I, right here, I say 2 + 2 = 22. Okay, that's a mistake. Everyone listening to this doesn't say they have to turn me into the board. There is no consequence to the public safety. There's no malpractice involved. There's no danger to the public. So being suspicious of something doesn't give you impetus, but if you know, if you have specific knowledge, you're obligated. 21, which of the following would not be grounds for discipline from the Colorado board? A, violation of an engineering law in another state. Let me reiterate. Which of the following would not be grounds? So A, violation of an engineering law in another state. You screw up in Missouri. B, failure to maintain errors and omissions insurance. C, a felony conviction related to the ability to practice engineering. D, using deceptive advertising practices. Give me your answer. B. If you break the law in another state, it transfers over to Colorado. If you commit a felony related to the ability to practice engineering, you're going to be disciplined. Your license will likely be suspended or revoked. If you use deceptive practices when advertising, your license can be suspended or revoked. 22, an unlicensed person performing engineering work in Colorado can be punished how? Again, giving that example, I am not a PE and I'm out there designing rebar or concrete or infrastructure, buildings and foundations, but I have no architectural license or engineering license. A, there's no legislative grounds for action or intervention. B, a cease and desist letter is issued by DORA, Department of Regulatory Agencies. C, charged with a Class 2 misdemeanor and punished with up to 12 months in jail or $1,000 fine or both. D, arrest and detention by the state of Colorado under the authority of the state attorney general. Which one of those? Is it defined penalty for a person that's practicing engineering. You could use that home inspection analogy that I gave you. A home inspector comes out and inspects a home, no PE, and says this home has a foundation that has proper integrity and can resist the anticipated structural loads. That person could be punished how in this list? 2, color revised statutes, and 18, which is the criminal code. So 12 says if you are practicing engineering without a license, and you're not an architect, because architects are exempt from these rules, then you shall be punished in accordance with the criminal code as defined, and that says class 2 misdemeanor and up to 12 months in jail. If you do it a second time, it's a class 6 felony. Now, in reality, we don't have a lot of police. If we go down to Canyon City and knock on some cells, there's not like murderer, rapist, and person who designed rebar without a license. That's not really going to happen. Generally, the board is looking to get people into compliance. They're going to provide a note that says, we learned that you're providing engineering without license, please stop. They may escalate that to a cease and desist letter, and they may escalate it. They're really not looking to put people in jail for that. And generally, voluntary compliance fixes it, not just in Colorado, but all 50 states. It usually comes from a point of ignorance. 23, who can lawfully perform construction inspections? The architect. B, an independent contractor licensed within the same authority having jurisdiction. C, a PE. D, a licensed home inspector. E, a municipal building inspector. Who do you think? There's more than one answer. Can you get them? I'll offer you a clue. There's 3. There's 3 in here. Can you get all 3? The architects, PEs, and a municipal building inspector those are the 3 entities that can go to a job site and say what was built complies with the applicable code or the material specifications or the adopted plan or the approved plans. Those are 3. 24, ethical issues. I'm trying to be respectful of your time. Ethical issues for the engineer can to resolve within a design build process include which of the following? All of them. In the design build process, it's clearly not prohibitive. It's not. And in fact, in many ways, it's a great delivery process, the design build program. But if you find yourself in the middle of it, just be aware. Keep looking right, keep looking left. There are pitfalls where you can find yourself going in the best direction of a potential client and unwillingly create an ethical dilemma for yourself. So just be aware. And if that comes as a surprise to you, you need to do some research. 25, how are engineers required to handle conflicts of interest in Colorado? A, resign. B, offer to give up the commission or employment. C, fully disclose the relationship in writing. D, don't let the relationship affect your judgment. If you think of a conflict of interest, just remember T. T, timeout, and T is transparency. If you think you have a conflict of interest, don't hide it. Be transparent about it. Offer it up. And sometimes the client will object, and then you've got to reassign it or offer to give up the commission. Sometimes the client does not object, in which case then you're going to try to do D, or maybe you don't have to have it affected. Maybe the client says, no, I'm okay with that relationship. And I could give you several examples, but in the interest of time, I cannot. 26, last one. Non-compete contracts agreements signed between employers and employees. Non-compete contracts for engineers signed between employers and employees are A, with a few exceptions, are becoming standard practice for all office staff. B, considered commonplace for all licensed or PE staff members. C, are encouraged and promoted in the state of Colorado. D, with minor exceptions, are illegal and are a misdemeanor for Colorado employer to require. Non-compete clauses. So if I get hired, it says, all right, if you leave our firm, you're not allowed to work for anybody else that's an engineer for 6 months or a year or forever. What do you think? What do you think? Non-compete contracts. This is our last slide. Colorado Revised Statutes, A2. They're illegal. Under no, let me see. Let me read it to you. Comes under Colorado Revised Statutes, Section 8, unlawful to intimidate workers or agreement to not compete. Number one is it shall be unlawful to use force, threats, or other means of intimidation to prevent any person from engaging in any lawful occupation at any place he or she sees fit. There are some exceptions. And I feel that's why I say with minor exceptions. One is if it's a trade secret. If you're the person at Coca-Cola who has the recipe for Coca-Cola, it is okay for Coca-Cola to make that person sign a non-compete that they will not go work for Pepsi-Cola. If you're the person that has the 11 herbs and spices for Colonel Sanders, you can sign a non-compete that you cannot go work for Chick-fil-A. That is a trade secret. That does not apply to engineering. The other one is if a company says, if we're going to pay for your master's degree or your undergraduate education or your whatever, they can restrict your employment, saying you either have to pay us back that education or you have to agree to not leave and go work for a competitor for a period of 2 years. It's got to be limited in scope. So if they pay for specific education that have significant value, they can also potentially include that. And the other exception is if you are an executive, essentially you're the highest level up in a particular company, the CEO can require those executives and restrict where they go, because essentially it gets back to they may have trade secrets. Your best objective is in a good offense. Keep your employees that you want to keep happy, pay them competitive salaries, give them appropriate titles, give them flexibility in how they perform it, not restricting them by a contract that somehow if they leave, they'll be destitute to a lesser pay or having to exit the engineering profession altogether. That's me talking. All right, that's the end of it. So what'd you do? If you missed one or two, you should have my job. I will give it to you. I will turn it over. You should have the Ethics and Legislative Committee. I think if I were taking this cold, I would definitely have solidly missed 3, especially the ones that had multiple answers. I would have missed that. If you're at 3 to 5, that's really great. You are up to speed. You are well-versed in what's going on in Colorado. If you missed 6 to 8, hopefully you realize this is a good refresher that these rules exist out there, that you've been looking at ACI, AISC, and all the transportation codes too closely, and you forget that there's this whole overall arching obligation for engineers. If you missed 9 to 13, this is your opportunity. Email me. I will send you all the Colorado Revised statutes. I probably can put my fingers on them faster than you can find them on the internet. You can certainly go to DORA, look up DORA, Engineers, Architects, and Land Surveyors. There's a link there at the very bottom. It says the laws, the bylaws, and the policies. Get a good refresher, get caught up. If you miss more than 13, you're screwed. You just don't even know it yet. You don't know what you don't know yet, and there are enough things out there that are going to bite you. And they're going to first bite the public because you are practicing in a manner that you are not serving the public adequately, and then that's going to turn around and bite you as an individual. And so get up to speed. Hopefully you're somewhere in the middle. No, actually, hopefully you missed 1 or 2, and I will turn over the reins to you. And that's it. I'm going to stop share right now and turn it over to Stephanie for any concluding remarks. I greatly appreciate your time. I also want to put a plug. If you're listening to this and you have an idea, a specific knowledge, or a project, this profession is elevated by sharing knowledge. That's what this group is about. That's why ASCE exists. That's why SEAC exists. That's why CAGE exists. It's not up here because you're bestowed upon some sort of royalty. It is engineers coming together to discuss ideas, good project outcomes, bad project outcomes, philosophies, new techniques. Give of yourself, talk to an ASCE officer and say, hey, I got an idea for a presentation. I can put it together and come and do something like this. And if you think I'm not talking to you, that's wrong. I am talking to you. All of you have specific knowledge. Nobody has had your exact career. Share with us. Help us all collectively get better by sharing what you know. That's how this works. That's it. Stephanie, I'll turn it back over to you. Or Lauren. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. There are a number of questions in the chat. Would you like me to read them to you?
Sure. I'm sorry. Yes, please do.
So the first one is from Nicole Ellison. She says, as engineers, how do we incorporate sustainability into our design?
Great question, because under Canon 1, it has been updated that you are not just required to protect and preserve the safety, health, and welfare of the public. You shall also comply with the principles of sustainable development. And that's tough, because as soon as you start using raw materials, you have to realize that I'm harvesting from the earth or something's going to end up in a landfill, and it's hard. My analogy on that, it is like turning an aircraft carrier. It is slow. We collectively as engineers are going to have binary decisions. Do we just go ahead and use natural resources and screw recyclability? Or if we have the option to use certain recycled materials in a project or contemplate renewal, that we constantly do that. If we push in that direction and that everything we specify in the plans and the material specifications, or at least have that in mind, we will create market forces that'll demand the invention of new materials and the ability to reuse materials for the betterment of infrastructure. So I have a certain amount of guilt at night when I say, well, I'm specifying this material, I know it's not recyclable, and I know we're harvesting. Whenever I use concrete, I mean, there's a lot of carbon dioxide that goes into the air, but I don't have an alternative. So the answer is, don't just throw up your hand and say, well, can't design it. People just don't have places to live. We can't have bridges. We can't have roads. No. But with everything I specify as well, can I use something slightly different, or can I use less of it, or can I bring it in a recycled fashion? Can we reuse recycled aggregate? Yes. And those are the forces that I think my interpretation of ASCE is asking us to go in.
I'll just add one thing to that, Peter, too. Nicole, I would recommend looking into the Envision framework. It basically is a framework for all civil infrastructure regarding sustainable design. So definitely look into that. And we actually, our presenter in January will be discussing an Envision project. So look out for that. So Jim Kaiser says, I recently saw an email signature block for project engineer followed by Bob Smith, EI. Should that person be using the title engineer to describe their position?
Okay, so I at least need to say that the authority in making that determination lies in the board, and the board turns over. There are people that volunteer their time, and that is constantly changing over. So the flavor of the board can change. But I will tell you the general trend in that is, if you're, say, Bob Smith, project engineer, EI, that's if you put EI directly in conjunction with the engineer, you're not misleading the public in terms of your actual certifications. Certainly, let me give you the other extreme. If Bob Smith, who's an EI, says project engineer PE, clearly wrong, absolutely wrong. If they say Bob Smith, project engineer, I would say still wrong, because you're offering services to the public that the public's going to now interpret that you have certification that you don't. And if you get confused on this, just use the word doctor. For some reason, we can all collectively agree that I want a doctor to have certain qualifications. If you're not a doctor, don't tell me you're a doctor. So if it can be confused, clear it up. I would say Bob Smith, EI, and then a project engineer, it's a little confusing. Clean it up, project engineer, EI, Bob Smith, EI. That's not misleading the public. I think that's open and honest. You do have a bachelor's degree, and you did pass a certain FA exam. You should be proud of that. You should not deny those accomplishments.
All right, another question from Nicole Ellison on question number 22 from your worksheet. Are you saying that architects are exempt?
Yeah, so under the Colorado Revised Statutes and the bylaws, it says, here's all the rules, black and white, that engineers must adhere to, unless you're exempted. And one of those exempted is a professional architect. Another exemption is a building official. So I can't provide design services to the public. It says, unless you're an engineer, you can't provide design services. Well, what's an architect supposed to do? Well, they're exempted from that rule. Construction inspections, unless you are licensed, you shall not perform construction compliance for compliance with plans and specifications. What the heck's an architect or a building inspector supposed to do? They fall in the very first part that says building inspectors are exempt. Architects are exempt. People performing engineering for themselves are exempt. If I want to do a tree house in my backyard and I'm not an engineer, I can theoretically get out a book and figure out how to design pieces and parts and nails because it's for me. I can do engineering for myself. I can't do it for the public. That's another exemption.
All right, question from Russell Garrett. He actually has two.
You're only allowed one, Russell.
What was the eighth canon and when was it added? And
Oh,
I actually have it up if you don't know.
oh, that'd be
Um,
great. So I will
code of,
tell you, Russell, and I'm going to be momentarily unprofessional because this is exactly what I tell my students. If you want to know what Canon 8 is, it says, don't be a dick. So, Roman, can you please read exactly what Canon 8 is?
okay, codifying diversity as ethics. And it says, Canon 8 addresses fair and equitable treatment of not only fellow engineers, but also people in the communities we serve. I'm not going to
That's
read
not
more.
true. That's not what it says.
I got that
Canon,
from the ASCE website.
no, it is not. Hang on.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
That's what the ASCE website says for Canon 8.
Code of Ethics. It was just adopted. And essentially it says, give me one quick second. I think this is very important. Oh man, what the heck is it? Canons. Society, what the? I can't put my hands on it. I'm gonna get it. Oh, they did just update it. All right, essentially, canon number 8 is whenever you're dealing with coworkers or clients or employment, you shall never use the basis of gender or sexual orientation or race or religion to make those decisions. Something that I think any reasonable human being would do anyway. It's a longer sentence, but it essentially is don't be a jerk to other people.
And then can you speak to PE rubber stamping?
PE rubber stamping. So what rubber stamping is generally that somebody is endorsing something or signing something without having responsible charge. A responsible charge is defined under the revised statutes as having knowledge about a project that you have essentially been there from the conception. You have personally made decisions regarding choices of materials, layout, owner's needs, and that you have it. So a team of people can work on a project and it all comes down to one person stamping it. And the hurdles that you as an individual must go through as well. I did have a draft work on it, and I did have these junior engineers work on it, had these other PEs go on it. But at the end of the day, are you familiar with the project that you know that what went into it is adequate to serve the public? And if the answer is yes, then you've met your obligations for responsible charge. The other side of that is somebody else develops a set of plans and says, hey, Peter Marxhausen, we did this, we forgot we need an engineer, or we forgot to tell you about this, or the engineer's on vacation. Can you just stamp this so we can get this over to the building department? That's rubber stamping. That's not allowed. That does not meet the responsibility of responsible charge or the requirement for responsible charge. Hopefully that answers the question. Simply stamping is something that you did not develop from the very beginning. I will tell you one of the things that it comes up that we talk about at the university in classes is, let's say an engineer like myself, let's say I'm working on a big project, it goes on for 8 months, we get to the very end, we're ready to stamp, and I die of a heart attack. Who's allowed to pick up those drawings and go ahead and stamp them because they're, $50,000 into the design? And the answer is nobody. You technically, if you really read it, you need to start all over again, which is why a smart company dealing with a bigger project should theoretically have multiple PEs on it that could all theoretically have responsible charge. To that same end, New York has written into legislative action on how to get around that. If a PE is unable, unfit, or dead, who's worked on it, how does a new PE come in and take responsibility for it without having to destroy everything that is there? And I think I got off the topic. But PE rubber stamping is you need to be there from the inception and the concept all the way through to when you put your stamp on it. If you haven't, don't put your stamp on it because you're rubber stamping.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like Kalina found the description of the canon. She
Yes. All right. I get to read it. All right. Kalina, thank you very much. Kalina is actually a former student of mine who is a big success story. I think she's out in, not Kansas. No, I think you're out in Kansas City, Colleen, if I remember right. Engineers shall, in all matters related to their profession, treat all persons fairly and encourage equitable participation without regard to gender or gender identity or race or national origin or ethnicity or religion or age or sexual orientation, disability, political affiliation or family, marital or economic status. You know how you summarize that? Don't be a dick. And again, I'm sorry that's an unprofessional term, but truly, if you don't see the parallels there, you've got a problem.
Yeah, so Nicole Ellison follows up and she says, so why are women engineers still getting paid less than men?
I don't have an answer for that. Reasonably, they shouldn't. I don't know, Nicole, if you're trying to bait me into preaching here, but let's just agree that they shouldn't be.